I love cryptid shit myself, so I was pretty excited when I recently found out that my late grandfather had an encounter with one when he and my father lived in the Soviet Union. Granddad, an electrical engineer, gets called to a town near the shores of the Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is known for, among other things, being fed by 330 rivers, but emptying into only one, having an incredible ecosystem of thousands of species, half of which are only found there. Being the deepest lake in the world. Being the biggest lake in the world, by surface area. And being the oldest lake in the world, as well as being the center of all manners of legends and creepy shit. So, my grandfather arrives by the time it's getting dark, so the client insists that he stay the night in the Gostanitsa, but not before inviting him for supper. Over the meager meal they discuss details of the problem and possible solutions. As the sky darkens, the client makes an odd remark that sounds out of place coming from the mouth of such a fellow. Do take care not to leave your room in the Gostanitsa during the night. There are creatures out there. After checking how much vodka the client had drank, my grandfather asks him what he means, and after a little hesitation and a request not for him to talk about this, the client obliges my grandfather. Around the forest we find huge mounds of droppings, with whole skeletons intact, of sizes everything between, and including wolves to bears. These shit mounds are left by giant snakes that live in the lake. This was the only doubtful part of the story, as a snake usually wouldn't want to venture into the freezing cold lake, though it would make a great deal of sense for such a creature to reside in burrows underground. Reports of sightings of the creatures are only heard once or twice a year compared to the often seen mounds, because, well, human bones too fall under the purview of everything in between. And when a set of found reports of a missing person from as far as a few towns over are never far behind. But try not to think too much about what I've just told you. Just stay in your room for the night, and do have a good night's rest. My grandfather had little trouble not thinking about it, as he made his way to his room that night, as it frankly stunk of giant snake shit. So giving the whole silly thing no more thought, he changed into his nightclothes, and swung open the room window to let a cool breeze in. He studied the schematics a little longer until he was satisfied that he had figured it out, then got up to extinguish the light to get some sleep. Turning towards his bed in the now dark room, he sees, peeking through the opened window, the head of a huge snake illuminated by pale moonlight, its further tongue flicking up and down. As any sane man would do, he ran into the closet and shut the door behind him. For not more than 20 seconds, he heard the most infernal thrashing of wood against wood and leathery flesh, and of papers and bed covers being whipped about at breakneck speeds. That small time felt like an eternity, as did the minute or so until he heard a rapping on his room's door, and a man's voice. "Hey, what the hell is going on in there? You've woken everybody up, and I've called the police." My grandfather rushed out of the closet, through the wrecked room, and out into the hallway, slamming the door behind him. He gets accosted by the owner until the police arrive, who inspect the room, or what was left of it. Papers are all about, the furniture reduced to splinters, and the bed covers were nowhere in sight. My grandfather collected his few remaining things, and, as per police's orders, was given a different room for the night. One of them stepped aside to talk to my grandfather. "Don't open your window again. We don't want to come back here again tonight to recover a body, or worse." Rest of the trip went uneventfully. My grandfather fixed the problem and promptly returned to Ukraine, where he and my father, then in his early youth, lived. But my grandfather did bring one thing back. On a trip to the Museum of Natural History, he brought it in between the pages of a book, meaning it was probably a scale. My grandfather shows it to the curator, who shows great interest in it. My grandfather relates the story of how he got it, as the curator inspects excitedly. The curator asks if he can hang on to it to conduct some research, and ensures my grandfather that he'll show him his findings. My grandfather accepts, and parts with the thing, but the curator never did get back to him. But my grandfather did get back to the curator, after having some difficulty finding him. The curator responded almost angrily to being questioned about the item and his research on it. "That thing you brought me was a hoax, and nothing more. I've decided I want nothing to do with the damned fake, and I suggest you decide the same." And that concludes the story. Now, the strangest thing about this story, at least to me, is that before hearing it, I had heard of all sorts of strange goings-ons in and around Lake Baikal, but never of anything like this. The only thing relatively close was a single isolated mention of a possibility of a Nessie-style plesiosaur-type thing entering the ecosystem through one of the 330 rivers feeding the lake, since one of those things could possibly be mistaken as a giant snake, but there's just about nothing else. Quite the peculiar affair, isn't it? What's hiding or being hidden at the Lake Baikal?